Hi, Verity Rabbit. I want to start this by clearing something important up. You see, the entertainment industry didn't lose its soul overnight. There wasn't a meeting, there wasn't a particular villain, there wasn't a single bad movie that just broke everything. What happened was this: it slowly stopped caring whether it was honest. And the strange part is, nobody wants to talk about that. We keep arguing about symptoms instead, about casting, about demographic targeting, about box office numbers, as if those things happened accidentally, as if they weren't deliberate safety measures, as if the story didn't already surrender before the audience ever saw it. These things aren't the disease, though. They're the rash from it. The disease is this. Somewhere along the way, corporations decided the story wasn't strong enough to stand on its own because they no longer believed in it. So they stopped having faith in it. And when you don't believe in the story, you stop protecting its integrity. You start protecting your return on investment. For most of human history, stories had one job: not to affirm you, not to comfort you, not to reassure you that everything you already believe is correct. Stories existed to test ideas. They were allowed to be wrong inside the story. They were allowed to fail. They were allowed to be hurt, physically and emotionally. They were even allowed to offend the storyteller. That's how meaning shows up. Somewhere along the way, entertainment stopped being about exploration and became about risk management. And once that happens, the soul is the first casualty. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most modern entertainment is not designed to be good. It's designed to be defensible. Defensible to executives, defensible to marketing, defensible to social media, defensible to future press releases, which means sharp edges get sanded down before they ever touch the audience. Or more accurately, only certain edges are allowed to be sharpened. Modern entertainment hasn't eliminated the sharpness. It has only curated it. Some perspectives are permitted to cut deeply. Others are considered too dangerous to even test. So conflict doesn't disappear, it becomes directional. Emotion isn't gone, it's selectively protected. Themes don't vanish, they calcify into approved slogans. You can show bravery, as long as it points the right way. You can show vulnerability, as long as it belongs to the right kind of character. And in the process, the very people marked as protected become the new subject of exploitation. Not because they are shown, but because they are never allowed to be fully human. They're preserved, they're handled, placed on a pedestal, and even there, they're used. Just like every other fashionable archetype in every other era. Anything outside that lane isn't explored, it's preemptively avoided. Not because it lacks story potential, but because it risks the wrong kind of backlash. And when sharp edges are allowed to cut in only one direction, the result isn't honesty, it's fashion. And as we all know, fashion is temporary. Nothing truly collides, nothing truly surprises. And when surprise is removed, nothing fully lands. And when nothing fully lands, nothing sticks. Now, this is the part where people get uncomfortable. Signaling didn't ruin stories by existing. Stories have always carried values. Myths are nothing more than but values under pressure. The problem is how signaling is used now. It's no longer an idea the story is willing to test. It's a demographic calculation the story is built around. The signal can point left, it can point right, it can point anywhere that reliably fills seats. See, that's the tell. Instead of letting ideas collide inside the narrative itself, modern entertainment installs signaling like armor, preemptive, non-negotiable, not to explore meaning, but to guarantee alignment. When a story knows in advance which audience it is courting and which reactions are unacceptable, it stops being a story. It becomes a targeting strategy with production design. Now, this is why writing feels different now. Characters don't discover who they are, they announce it. Dialogue doesn't reveal tension, it explains intent. Growth isn't earned by failure, it's granted through declaration. Failure itself has become unacceptable. Not tragic, not costly, just temporary, if at all, which means stakes evaporate. If a story refuses to let someone or anyone be wrong, it's not being kind, it's being dishonest. That is not the human experience. That is artificial. If that sounds abstract, Marvel accidentally made it visible. Now, let's make this a bit more concrete. Take a recent Marvel movie. You choose. Pick almost any of the newer ones. The problem is never that the characters are unlikable. The problem is that they are untouchable. They can be bruised, embarrassed, or momentarily sad, but never truly wrong. They don't fail because of who they are. They stumble because the script needs a beat. And the moment failure threatens to mean something, it's softened, joked away, reframed as growth. Not because the writers are stupid, because the system will not allow irreversible consequences, and the allowance for failure is not evenly distributed. Some characters are permitted to be wrong, foolish, or humiliated, because the story has decided they can, or even should, absorb it. Others are insulated from that treatment because their symbolic role must remain intact. That asymmetry is the tell, and it's all based on the demographic audience being courted. Now, let's look how Marvel does it. Characters like Ant-Man are framed as wrong by default. His instincts are treated as naive. His confidence is something the story feels obligated to puncture. Take Thor. He's allowed to become a joke because his strength and competence are already assumed. The humor doesn't challenge him. It's meant to deflate him. The Hulk's suffering is played for laughs or dismissal when the story decides his pain no longer carries narrative or social priority. The pattern isn't cruelty, it's a calculation. Failure is a sign where it won't threaten the story's preferred signals. Humiliation is used where it feels culturally safe, where the character is allowed, or even expected, to lose. So yes, characters still fail, but only if they fit a model the desired culture has decided is allowed to lose. Marvel used to use humor as contrast. Now it's anesthesia. At any moment, that risk weight is immediately undercut. Not to be funny, to be safe. Silence is dangerous. Stillness invites interpretation. Interpretation invites disagreement. So the joke arrives like a fire extinguisher. Not because the scene needed it, because someone might feel something a little too strongly. Now another tell. Lore has replaced character. Backstory substitutes for motivation. World building substitutes for consequence. Characters explain what they believe instead of discovering it under pressure. Which is why so many of these movies feel busy but empty. They're full of information, but starved of meaning. Now, this isn't about Marvel hating creativity, it's about scale. When a story becomes a brand pillar, it cannot afford uncertainty. So writing becomes architectural, load-bearing jokes, reinforced arcs, emotion routed around risk. Nothing is allowed to collapse, including bad ideas. Now, let's take ancient stories. The Odyssey. It didn't have to explain itself. It doesn't pause to reassure you. It doesn't retrofit its symbols to avoid discomfort. Its ideas are embedded in character, action, and consequence. If you disagree with them, the story lets you. It trusts the audience to wrestle with itself. Modern adaptations often do the opposite. They change symbols without interrogating them inside the story. Not to explore a new meaning, but to signal safety to a chosen audience. When mythic logic is altered without narrative pressure, the result isn't reinterpretation, it's insulation. The story stops asking questions and starts managing their reactions. And once that happens, the soul is already gone. Now, it's also worth saying this plainly. What you're seeing now isn't permanent. It never is. Cultural dominance moves in cycles. It always has. The prevailing voice today happens to lean one way. Before that, it leaned another. And it will swing again. We've seen this movie already. The 80s action era was just as blunt, just as fashion-driven, and just as shallow in its own way. Different aesthetics, different heroes, same mistake. Power follows popularity, then popularity burns out and something else replaces it. The tragedy isn't that the pendulum is swinging, it's that the system never learns. Instead of trusting stories, each era just swaps costumes and repeats the same exploitation under a new moral banner. That's not evolution, it's rotation. And here's the part nobody enjoys. We ourselves trained this, not just with applause, but with money. Look at the box office. Look at the streaming numbers. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent. Netflix, a company that started by mailing DVDs, now worth nearly $500 billion. That didn't happen by accident. And take Disney. It isn't what it was once, financially, but it's still producing enormous, expensive movies, and they keep getting made. Why? Because the machine is still being fed. By people who love Disney, by people who hate Disney, by curiosity, by outrage, by habit. Every ticket, every stream, every hate watch. The machine doesn't care why you showed up, only that you did. So it keeps going. The system keeps rewarding safety. The incentives remain intact. And the cycle continues. The tragedy isn't that bad stories exist. They always have. The tragedy is that honest stories are now liabilities. Where failure is career ending. Where taking a real swing is considered irresponsible. So we get sludge. Endless, expensive, beautifully rendered sludge. And that's why so many people feel tired of watching something that was supposed to entertain them. Not really angry, not really offended, just empty. Because nothing was at stake, nothing was risked, nothing was truly said. And that emptiness lingers longer than anger ever does. Entertainment didn't lose its soul because it misplaced it, though. It gave it up, so their desired audience would never have to admit that they were wrong.